where I was born, at 69 Vermont Avenue in West Asheville. The house is still there.
Really?
Sure is. And they don't have a plaque or sign or anything on it saying what happened August the 4th, 1926. But I guess they will before too long. But that was
Where
only
where is that?
Vermont Avenue is in West Asheville off of Haywood Road.
Really?
Yeah, I'll take you by there. We lived at several places. Of course, that was back during in the 30s during the Depression. And we lived at different streets in West Asheville, I imagine, because my daddy, who was a tailor, and he didn't make a lot of money, but we always had something to eat, and we had clothes, and we had a place to live. But I imagine that one of the reasons we moved often was because maybe he found a house where the rent was cheap.
Mhm.
And I was born at 69 Vermont Avenue when the Depression came, and then we moved to, I think it was number 6 Brevard Road. So all of these houses are in West Asheville, and that house has been torn down. And then from 6 Brevard Road we moved back to Vermont Avenue to 72 Vermont, which was right across the street from the house where I was born. From 72 Vermont, we moved to 42 Vance Crescent, which was just about a block from the other house. We lived there a while, and then from there we moved to, from 72 Vermont Avenue, we moved to 25 Brevard Road, back on Brevard Road again.
Mhm.
And that house is still there. Now that's just about a half a block from Haywood Road, the end of the car line they called it then, that was as far as the streetcar ran to West Asheville. It ran on Haywood Road, down the middle of the road on tracks, and it had to stop at Brevard Road because that was where the tracks stopped. So of course the streetcar couldn't go any further than the tracks went. So anyway,
explain that to me. What was there like? What would they do then?
well, I'll tell you in a minute. We moved from 25 Brevard Road. From there we moved to 42 Vance Crescent. And from there we moved to 17 Baker Avenue, which is down there at the Calvary Baptist Church, just off of Haywood Road. From there we moved to number 3 Saluda Avenue, which also was in West Asheville. Then we moved and bought a house at 44 Virginia Avenue. That was in 1937. So we lived there until I left home and James left home and my mother died, and at 44 Virginia Avenue. But the end of the car line is what you don't hear many people mention it now. We used to, with people talking about West Asheville or where something was in West Asheville, they'd say, it's right there at the end of the car line. Well, that was where the streetcar stopped on Haywood Road at Brevard Road. And I've ridden it many times, and I love to ride the streetcar. But when the streetcar would get to Brevard Road on Haywood Road at the end of where the track stopped, and that came all the way from downtown Asheville all the way out there, then the streetcar would stop, and the conductor would, they called it kind of like a big old pole, an antenna maybe, on each end, at the top of the streetcar, on each end. And when he would get to the end of the line at Brevard Road, he had a cable that he pulled from that end, and it would pull disconnect that like an antenna, like a pole up there, and hooked onto the wire. He'd pull it down and tie it, and then he'd come back into the streetcar, back facing toward town, and he'd let it go back up. And then he would go along the aisle in the streetcar and reverse the backs of the seats. The seats were made of kind of a straw-like, and they had a handle on the end of the seat. And he'd go back the aisle and pulling those seats back so you'd be facing forward when you went back to town. And then we'd start off, and I think it cost 6 cents to ride the streetcar. And when we would get we rode on Haywood Road about 2 miles, and we came to what's called Beecham's Curve. It was a real sharp curve to the left going downhill to the river, to the bridge. And we'd turn down there and head down that hill, and boy, that old streetcar would just be rocking back and forth, and I was scared to death it was going to go off the track. But it never did. It had always made that curve onto the bridge, and then we'd go around Clingman Avenue and up through there and up French Broad Avenue uptown. And that.
Were you allowed to ride the streetcar by yourself when you were little?
I don't much believe I did because when they took the streetcars off in 1934, and I would have been 8 years old, so I doubt if I could ride the streetcars by myself then. But I had some friends that I worked with later on, and they talked about on Saturdays what he and his brother would do. He was a little older than us, but they would get on the streetcar in West Asheville and pay their fare and get a transfer. And they'd go uptown and they'd get another transfer, and they'd just ride all over town on that streetcar all Saturday afternoon. They'd just get a transfer and get another transfer, and then get a final transfer and go back home to the car. But streetcars was nice.
Just spent all day riding the streetcar, just for fun.
Yeah, that's what they did on Saturday afternoons, just to have something to do. They took the streetcar. And let's see.
We didn't have very many things to do back then.
That's right. We made things, and in the summertime, the boys we'd make what we call rubber guns. We'd get 2 pieces of wood and whittle one out kind of like this long maybe and kind of round, and for the barrel, and then we'd get another piece of wood and nail it or tie it on with a rubber or something to the barrel, and then we'd tie a clothespin to the back of the handle, and then to make what we call rubbers, that's where the rubber gun thing came in. We'd go up to the filling station, and back then automobiles, the tires had a rubber inner tube inside the tire, and when people had inner tubes would wear out, or the tires when they changed tires or something, they'd throw those inner tubes away and buy a new inner tube. And we'd go to the filling station, and they gave us an old inner tube anytime we wanted one. And we'd take scissors and cut that inner tube into strips about this long and about that wide. And of course it was just in a circle, like a rubber band. And we'd put one end of that inner tube strip in that clothesline on the back of our rubber gun, and then we'd pull it up and just fold the other part of it up at the end of the barrel. So that was a rubber gun, and when you mash down on that clothespin, it'd open up and let that rubber go, and boy, it would pop somebody on the back, and we'd play cowboys and Indians all summer long with the rubber gun. And it could get painful sometimes. I remember all the boys, of course, during the summertime, we wouldn't wear shirts, we just bareback. And somebody, I don't know who it was, anyway, got the smart idea, if they take one of those rubbers and tie a knot in the middle of it, that would make it stretch real tighter. When you put it onto the clothespin and pull it out and hook it on the end of the barrel, that was real tight. And naturally, when you let that mashed on the clothespin and you let that rubber go, it would go a whole lot further. And I remember some guy we were playing, and he got around the corner of the house somewhere behind me, and he reached around the corner and he almost had that thing right at my back, and he let that thing go, and you talk about smarty, now that hurt. But we did a lot of things like that. And another thing we would do, back then in the filling station, when you got a quart of oil, it was in a tin can, a metal can. And we'd go up there and get in there, where they threw those empty cans. We'd get one of those cans and lay it down flat on the sidewalk or the street, and then we'd take our shoe and stomp on it like that, to where it would kind of clamp onto our shoe. And we'd put one on each shoe, and we'd walk up and down the street and the sidewalk with those empty oil cans on our shoes, and just like a horse going down the road. Crazy things we did.
What'd you guys do? Huh? I'm sorry.
That was back in the 30s during the Depression, when not many people had much of anything. Nobody's jobs were hard to find, and a lot of people lost everything they had. And so we just had to make do and make our own toys. And I remember another time, to make a scooter. You know what a scooter is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'd get 2 pieces of wood, maybe like a 2x4, and make a scooter this way, and then we'd get another one and tie and nail onto the front for the handle. And if we had got an old skate, the skate had worn out, we'd take one of those skates and take it apart and put the front 2 wheels from the skates on the front of that scooter and the rear 2 wheels from the skate on the back of the scooter, and we'd have a homemade scooter. And that was fine. And we were poor, but we didn't know it. Weren't we?
That's right. And you all had more than we did.
guess so. We didn't,
Of course, we didn't,
we were fortunate.
we lived, as I said, my granddaddy had that little farm, and of course, during the real part of the Depression, of course, Dad didn't even have a job. Your daddy did have a job.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we made plenty of food. We never ran out. Mama sewed for us, you know, so
You lived off the land.
we had plenty to eat. We were never cold. And of course, we had stoves in the house. We didn't have central heat. Well, you all didn't either, did you? But we had plenty of wood because my granddaddy there was just a lot of trees on his land, and they'd cut down big old oak trees, and of course that oak would burn, you know, for a long time. It was really good burning stuff. But when I was little, particularly when I was little, I liked to follow my granddaddy around because he had a sled, or he had the horse hitched to the wagon, or he was doing stuff like that. Of course, I liked to follow him around and get to ride the sled and then get to ride on the wagon and all that stuff. And Mama was always making things. She'd make, they'd make molasses candy, and you'd pull that old stuff till it just about turned white, you know. We did a lot of stuff like that, made popcorn balls. Papa always grew a lot of popcorn, and
Made fudge.
made fudge, and we made, they had a little orchard. We had loads of apples. We just we didn't have a lot of money to spend, but we had plenty of what we needed, you know. So.
A lot of things we didn't have, but we did pretty good.
Of course, the thing about it is, everybody was in the same fix. You didn't think too much about it because everybody was the same. It was the same way. So, and I remember one time we didn't have telephone, and one time it was pretty cold, and Mama and Papa Green lived at Addie, about a mile away from where we lived, and or maybe a little farther, and Uncle George and Aunt Willa and Marcy and Peggy lived at Addie too. Well, I don't know how come them all to decide the same day that they were going to come down to our house and spend the night. So, of course, there wasn't any such thing as calling ahead, you know, or anything like that. You just pick up your clothes and go. So,
Well, they expected you or not.
yeah, you didn't have to have an appointment. You just came. And I know Mama and Papa came down. They came down and going to spend the night. Well, it wasn't too long till here came Uncle George and Aunt Willa and Marcy and Peggy. So we had people sleeping all over the house. We had pallets and people. They instead of Whitney having sleeping bags, they would put quilts or blankets and things on the floor, and they called them pallets. Making a pallet. We had stuff we had them sleeping all over the house. But people had a good time. They get together like that and just, kids would play and the older ones sit around and talk about things they used to do, I guess. But we had a good time.
And then we would get to go to the movie, and in West Asheville they had a theater, the Palace Theater. And we got to go to the movie every Saturday afternoon. And it was also up at the head of Vermont Avenue, right close to where we lived. But I remember the box office opened, where you bought your ticket, the box office opened at 1:45. Well, Mother would give James and I 15 cents apiece, 10 cents for the movie, and 5 cents for a candy bar. So we'd stop at the drugstore on the way to the movie, and we'd get us a candy bar for a nickel. And then we'd go to the movie and pay a dime and go in, and we'd be there at 1:45, and the movie was usually always a cowboy picture, Western. It started at 1 o'clock, and then after that they'd have some comedy, you know, and then they'd have what we called a continued picture, a serial they'd have an episode that Saturday, and then it would end where the hero was about to get killed. The next Saturday he'd pick up again, and he never would get killed though. But we would spend, usually a lot of times, we'd stay in there in that movie and see it 2 or 3 times and come out late in the afternoon. And if the sun was, it was a sunny day and sunshine, and when you came out you couldn't hardly see, and everybody was going around like that. But,
And then Whitney, they'd come home and fight over who was gonna be Gene Autry or
the cowboys that we saw in the movie, now I remember there was Hoot Gibson and Bob Steele and Buck Jones and Tom Tyler, and I think early on was Tom Mix, and Gene Autry came later and some of those, but Hoot Gibson and Bob Steele and Tom Tyler and Buck Jones, they were our favorites. Like I said, we'd go home and we'd say, well, I'll be Buck Jones, I'm going to be Tom Tyler, and we'd just go around with our pop guns and having fights and all that stuff. So that's what we did to have a good time.
I mean, you got along without video games?
Video wasn't even in the dictionary.
We didn't know
It
that.
wasn't even a word.
No, I'm kidding.
We did finally get radios. Now I remember my first year in school. I went to school in the fall of 1932. I was 6 years old, and I went to band school. And I remember in March 1932, when President Roosevelt was elected in 1932. So in March of 1933, of course, I was in the first grade at band school, and I remember the day that Roosevelt gave his inauguration speech. And they took us all into the auditorium, and the principal was sitting up on the stage, and he had a radio sitting there on the floor beside him. One of the old radios about this high. So we went on, we sat there and listened to President Roosevelt make his speech. And it was on TV the other night, and I taped it, so we've got it on tape too. But school was fun. We had some good teachers and some bad teachers and some teachers that we were afraid of. But they were pretty strict. We had the mind pretty good, but back then kids behaved, I think, a little better than today. We didn't sass back to our teachers or talk back to them or anything like that. There was one in particular, I remember, she was a substitute teacher, real tall, and she looked like she was about 80. She was probably about 30, but she'd walk around with her arms folded like this, and we were all just scared to death of her. And that was one room where the kids were quiet. Nobody did anything. But I remember her name was Stallings, but had some good teachers, though. And, Miss Goffin, who died the other day in South Carolina, and she was 99 years old. But she was one of our teachers at Vance, and she taught a bunch of us to play harmonica. And she
Luke's
formed
sister
a
teaches at
harmonica
Vance.
band, huh?
Luke's sister teaches at Vance.
No kidding.
She's a Spanish teacher.
English.
Spanish.
Spanish.
Spanish teacher.
But anyway, Miss Goffin, we had uniforms. I guess our parents must have made them. They were red, white, and blue. We had white pants, and girls had white skirts and a blue sash, I think, and a hat. But anyway, that was when they had rhododendron festivals here then. They had several parades. Maybe every day for about a week they'd have a different parade. But one of the parades, well, we got to march in that, our harmonica band, and we played. And that was interesting and fun.
Whitney, I got to come and march in the parade too. We had what they called a toy band. They had a lot of kazoos, and they had drum and what?
Triangles.
Triangles, right, and cymbals and things of that sort. So our band got to come and march in the
That was
rhododendron
quite an
parade.
experience, wasn't
Yeah, it
it? All the
was.
way from Selma.
That's right.
On the train.
No, we
Drove.
came in a car. By that time we had cars.
Yeah. Yeah, those cars were old or something. We had, and my daddy always had a car. And wasn't new cars, but they were cars. We would, a lot of times, about the only time we went out of town was at Christmas, when we would go down to my grandparents, and they usually, back then, they were living around in Greensboro and High Point, in that area. And we had an old car, an Essex, I remember. And that car, we'd start out in, but at that time, you could leave here at Asheville about 7 in the morning, and you wouldn't get to Greensboro until about 4 that afternoon. Of course, that was way before interstates, and every time you came through, you went right through Main Street. But it seemed like every year when we'd go down there, we would get to Statesville, and the car would break down. Something went wrong, and it seemed like that car, all it could do, it would get to Statesville, and then it'd just kind of keel over and die, and we'd have to fix it and get head on. But we had an old Essex, and we had a Studebaker, and a Chandler. Chandler was the car we had the first one I remember, but now they quit making all of those cars a long time ago. But if you went 45, 50 miles an hour, you were flying back then. I mean, that was fast.
What was it Aunt Harriet said to her daddy?
Yeah, my grandfather, who was a preacher, and this must have been about 1915 or 16, 17, along in there. Anyway, the church sent him to the Methodist church at Andrews, which is over the mountain beyond Silva, like you're going to Murphy. And Granddaddy had a big touring car. That was a four-door car with the top would come down. It was a fabric top. At any rate, they were going to Andrews, and my Aunt Harriet, my mother's sister, was in the back, and they were going along over one of those mountain roads. And she said she raised up and looked over there to the dashboard, and she said, "My God, Papa, you're going 25 miles an hour." Scared her to death. There's a lot of times, a lot of good old times.
I bet there was a lot less deaths from car accidents.
Didn't have too many car accidents. Why, gosh, back then, Whitney, you could cross Haywood Road almost any time of the day with your eyes closed and not worry about getting run over. There wasn't hardly any traffic. Nobody. Very few people had cars. Now everybody's got 2 or 3 cars to a family. And back then they did good to have one car.
Hey, didn't you say that you used to sweep the dirt floors in your house?
My great-grandfather Moore, when I was trying to find out where they lived out at Mills River and where they went to church and where they were buried and all, I contacted a distant cousin who I'd never met, but at that time she lived up around Baltimore. I think her husband was in the Navy. And she wrote me a nice letter back and said that she remembered being out to John and Moore, my great-grandfather's name, and his wife was her first name.
I forgot.
Sarah. Anyway, she said, I faintly remember being at their house one time, and she says, as well as I can remember, the house had dirt floor. Now this would have been around early, maybe 1900, 1890 something maybe. But I never knew them, of course. They died long before I was ever born.
Well, David, that Leslie or whatever his
Bessie
name,
Moore?
you know, he told you that they had that they had a cabin out there and the floor was dirt.
Yeah, that's right. We went by and saw where the house was.
Saw where
It
the
long
house was.
gone.
And they had, she had, that poor little grandmother had 7 boys.
They moved up to Henderson County from Rutherford County. It was sometime between 1840 and 1850. And they had 2 sons at that time. Now this is my dad's father. No, my dad's grandfather and grandmother. She was born in 1824, I think, and he was born in 1827. And they moved from Rutherford County to Henderson County, Mills River section, which is maybe halfway between Asheville and Hendersonville. Mills River, and you went back up in the mountains there. And this cousin of mine that I later met later on, Lissy Moore, lived at Mills River, and he took me up there where their house was, and it was called in Moore's Cove. Now this is 3 or 4 miles beyond the Mills River campground, if you're ever out that way. But it's all government land now. But anyway, we went up there about 2 or 3 miles beyond that campground and parked, and then we got out and walked about a mile out in the forest, and he showed me a clearing up in there and up in the cove, and he said right up in there is where their house was.
Huh.
And they had, like she said, there were 7 boys in that family. And that was, one of the boys was my grandfather.
And of course, Whitney, at that time, that's where all those children were born. They were born out there
Yeah.
in that
they do if a woman had complications?
She had complications. I guess they could try to get a doctor as well as they could, or get her to a doctor.
There's
Not
a whole
mine.
new symbol coming up here now. It's a little sunshine.
Maybe that's the light too. The light.
Maybe it's really angry with me for not using enough light and starting to give me more symbols. Let's pause and see if this is coming out okay, because maybe this symbol means it isn't.
Okay.
It's a little.
It's News Leader. This is News 13 at 6.
A child care provider temporarily loses her license after she's accused of selling drugs out of her home daycare. Good evening, I'm Darcel Grimes.
And I'm Frank Crocker. After a lengthy investigation, the Forest City Police Department arrests 2 people, including the operator of Nanny's First Steps Daycare. News 13's Mary Jedlicka joins us live now with the latest on this case. Mary?
Nancy Henson had her license for just over a year. Now the state has shut down her daycare and she could face hard time. Neighbors of 41-year-old Nancy Henson, the owner and operator of Nanny's First Steps Daycare in Forest City, say over the past few weeks they've seen police watching her home. But it still surprised them when authorities arrested both Henson and 33-year-old Shafiq Amir Muhammad on charges of manufacturing, selling, delivering, and possessing drugs at a child care center.
Upon conducting a search of that daycare, which also serves as a residence, they recovered approximately 2 ounces of marijuana and less than 1 ounce of cocaine.
Henson's neighbors wouldn't talk on camera about the charges, and a relative of the children Henson watched says the arrest left the children's mother distraught and troubled. Henson's license shows she was certified by the state of North Carolina, but state officials recommend looking beyond the license before picking a daycare provider.
Should ask for written policies on fees, hours of operation, emergency plans, types of activities that are planned for the children. And again, it's very important that they feel comfortable that they can drop in at any time.
The North Carolina Department of Child Development says Henson's license is suspended pending the outcome of these drug charges. Now, Lieutenant Tate says that his department is seeing more drug activity in Forest City. However, this is the first time he has arrested somebody that has had a daycare and has used it in possible connection with narcotics. Frank?
Mary, this has to make parents nervous. Anything else they can do to make sure nothing illegal is going on where their children are taken care of?
Well, the state has set up a website so parents can log onto it and get more information about daycare providers. All you have to do is go to WLOS.com. That's our website. Click on more information and we'll take you straight there. Reporting live in Rutherford County, Mary Jedlicka, News 13.
Big traffic tie-ups in the heart of Asheville today as road crews work to repair bridge damaged in an accident. The DOT shut down all westbound lanes of I-240 underneath the Charlotte Street Bridge for several hours. A few weeks ago, a truck hauling a track hoe didn't have clearance and the equipment hit the bridge. So crews had to replace a huge steel beam to ensure safety.
We'll have to be underneath.
Over in World War II, it was signed over to the city in 1997 when a group started planning to convert it back into a public marketplace.
This building is so vital to downtown Asheville, it's just amazing. And so from 1927 till now, it's taken all this energy and all this time and money to bring this building back to where it belongs.
As the building lay dormant for years, the significance of the Grove Arcade was lost to generations of residents. But now this centerpiece is back and better than ever.
The place where everybody could come and feel welcome and feel a part of. And I think that remains our vision.
With new life, the Grove Arcade will be different things to different people. The building will once again be a vibrant venue to sell local goods. It's also prime office space. And the Grove Arcade also includes luxury living accommodations. So theoretically, all you need is right here in one place. And the partying continues inside there. This thing will wrap up about midnight or so. And by the way, there's another celebration planned in early November when the public's invited without a ticket just to come out and check out some of the businesses on hand here. So a lot of celebrating to be done, as this is truly a new era here in Asheville, a new old era, you could say, right back here in the city.
Well, John, it is a lot of space. Any idea of the occupancy rate yet?
Right now, we're told that there is a lot of interest in both the real estate end of it as far as the luxury housing as well as the office space. Right now, they're just getting a lot of interest in that, so they continue to have units available, but they're filling up rather quickly. I'm John Lee reporting live in Asheville, News 13.
Well, a committee of the local Tourism Development Authority votes to throw financial support the Grove Arcade's way. It recommends $100,000 be given to the downtown project. Also $400,000 for a new soccer complex to be built on city property along Azalea Road.